I want to start talking a bit about the past. In 2018, Porsche decided to commit $6 billion towards electromobility through 2023, not a small chunk of change. A portion of that went to developing this entirely new nameplate, which is the Taycan. And I don't think I've ever asked you why. I mean, besides this desire to go into electrification, why the Taycan? Why not put that money towards winning another Le Mans, for example, or perfecting the 911?
Yeah, well, first of all, you don't need 6 billion to win Le Mans, but you need to invest heavily into electrification to win the future. And if you take what you can do in electric cars, and if you had the chance to drive the Taycan, we have the chance to drive that car quite often together with our dealers. We just came back from Spain, where 191 US American dealers had the chance to drive a Taycan. You realize immediately why Porsche and electrification is actually a good combination. It's a combination that is not only good for sustainability reasons, it's also good for performance reasons. And the car really is outstanding when it comes to acceleration, combined with our chassis technology, with our experience to build cars, then you can take to the limit and beyond, and they still do what you expect them to do. So it's pretty exciting for all of us.
And did you took some of the technology that was created in motorsports and essentially applied it to the Taycan. Was the feeling that you just couldn't achieve that same type of performance in a pure, even in a hybrid technology, it had to go to that next step of a pure electric?
Well, currently our lineup is actually internal combustion engines, plug-in hybrids, and then battery electric vehicles. But let me say that the future is electric. So by 2025, Porsche will cross the tipping point, actually building more than 50% of its annual volume with a plug. So in one shape or form with either plug-in hybrid technology or fully battery electric vehicle, more than 50%. So our commitment is huge. The combustion engine, of course, is not dead, because when you take sports cars such as the 911, that car in terms of electrification will be last in line.
So thinking now ahead, looking ahead at what's coming up, I found it interesting that you, for the first effort in pure electrification, you created an entirely new nameplate. But for the second act, you've announced that the next EV, pure EV, is going to be the Macan. Why did Porsche decide to dip into the existing portfolio as the second EV? Why not continue with this new nameplate?
Simply because we think we have to always make sure that we deliver a car that lives up to our brand promise. And if you take the shape of a Taycan, it's lower than a 911. Its center of gravity is lower than a 911 or GT3. It's actually rather compact, but it has a size, so we have the right power for electric output in order to have a performant car. And then you define what speaks the brand best. And as much as we like SUVs, for the initial car, the battery electric vehicle entry, we said no, it has to be a coupe-like four-door sports car that everybody associates immediately with the brand Porsche. And we go for the bigger volume when the market is ready. So I think by the time we have the battery electric vehicle Macan is our more compact SUV, I think the market will be more ready for that type of vehicle coming from Porsche.
Is the all-electric Macan going to be similar to the one that you currently have on the market, or is it going to have some of the interior guts, like the infotainment system and some of the things that we've seen with the Taycan? I mean, how different is this all-electric Macan going to be?
I mean, no good deed goes unpunished. If you take the Taycan right now and put it next to all our other model lines within the Porsche brand, you see that actually design language of the Taycan takes it to the next level.
Right.
And obviously, we're going to continue doing that with the Macan as well. So the car will look significantly different from its current father, I may say, or from its predecessor. And our design language, of course, inside the car, there are more touch screens, there are more screens, generally speaking, for more information, for more connectivity, just being ready for the future and for what people expect when you drive in the future.
Well, you can tell more secrets here. There's there are no reporters here or anything like that. What about the competition? Ford just came out with their reveal just the other night, the Mustang Mach-E. People love to talk about, and I'm talking about competition with the Macan. The Model Y is constantly brought up as comparison. What is this all-electric Macan going to be competing against? Is it going to be competing against outside automakers or within its own portfolio? Meaning, will it cannibalize the gas-powered Macan sales?
I think by the time the battery electric vehicle Macan will be in the market, there's still a huge dominance of internal combustion engines. So it'll compete in many different segments. It's going to draw many people from different segments into that car. Just like, if I may make that comparison, like Tesla did. Tesla actually, with their product proposition, they conquered a lot from other established car brands with an offer that is truly outstanding. And I think battery electric vehicles going forward, you just mentioned Mustang, yes, they're going to do exactly the same thing because it's a new way of driving. And I've seen many people drive battery electric vehicles. I just told you, our dealers in Barcelona, they drove the Taycan. Many of them came back, and they're really the guys that carry the Porsche crest very close to their heart, and combustion engines, and the vibration, and the noise. They came back and said, why would you need a combustion engine going forward if you can have such a perfect package? So it's a transition that we're starting, but it's not a transition that is going to turn the world upside down within 5 years. It's probably 10 years. But as I said, the tipping point will be 2025 for us.
When you reach the end of that tipping point in 2025, or when you make that complete transition, will there still be, for all the diehard 911 fans, for example, be gas-powered versions? Yeah. And also, to follow up on that, can you get the technology, battery and performance technology, to a point where those diehards will find that an all-electric 911 will match or exceed the performance of your best 911 on the market right now?
We need to stay flexible in order to do what customers want us to do. And it's very difficult to project the future in what's happening in 5 to 10 years. I personally will always expect the 911 to be there and have a combustion engine inside, and be what we know cars are. But if you look at CO2 and if you look at sustainability aspects, if you look at fossil fuels, they come to an end someday. So let's keep that technology as long as possible because it is visceral. And there's a really interesting quote from our company founder, from Ferry Porsche, who said, the last car on Earth will be a sports car. And he didn't say a Porsche, he said a sports car. And it's an interesting quote because what he actually meant is when sailing ships were replaced by steam technology, steam engine technology, or later on different technologies, people said, why would you ever need a sailing yacht or a sailing boat? That doesn't make sense. You rely on something that you cannot predict. And yet, if you look at it today, it has turned out to be something that people really cherish, that people really value, and people do for fun. So it could very well be that the 911 at one point of time will have a GT3 setup and a combustion engine for those times when you're not getting from A to B, for those times when you just want to have fun.
I want to look inside the vehicle for a moment. Some of this new investment and research efforts are going towards kind of developing this ecosystem of digital services. I've I've seen it and played around with it within the Taycan during my own test drive. And I'm curious about what you're working on, because it's my understanding is that you're going to have over-the-air software updates, or that's available, so you'll be able to use that to add new features. What are the types of digital services and this ecosystem that you hope to create? And I'm assuming will go across the entire portfolio. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one big theme, of course, that every manufacturer has to be aware of is connectivity. So your car has to be connected with your user and with the outside world. And there are certain use cases that we're working on. We have now just founded a so-called digital factory in Atlanta, where Porsche Cars North America has its headquarters. And one of the projects is parking. Now you might say parking, okay, we've done that for a couple of years, it works. It's interesting, at least in Europe, there's some good stats that actually in inner city traffic, 2/3 of all traffic generated results from people searching for a parking spot. And that obviously is not really sustainable. So why couldn't we invent a parking solution where somebody gets the full transparency of what there is, make a reservation, and maybe even a reservation to park your Taycan. So there's a super charger there, or a turbocharger we call them, and you can then charge your car while parking. So connectivity is a big thing. Parking, that's the target picture. And there are parking apps out there that can already do that. We want to have ours a bit different, more integrated with a car. But that's one of the use cases.
So you mentioned that there are existing parking apps out there. Why not just partner with some of these native apps instead of creating your own? What's the benefit of doing that?
Well, at the end of the day, we will partner with somebody, but it has to be an app that fully integrates with the back end of our car and our owner's profile. We have an owner site, Porsche, My Porsche, where you as a customer have all the data relating to your car and your ownership in there, and obviously that app has to integrate into the back end of that. So for paying reasons and all other reasons for your subscription management. So that's what we're actually doing. But yes, there are partners out there, and we're trying to get them to be the front end when it comes to the service, but back end integration when it comes to our cars.
Are there any other features or services that you could talk about? I mean, I know that they might not be fully baked yet, but beyond the parking, that to get people excited about what's to come?
I don't know whether you can say excited, but let's just presume you're in one of our cars. Your car knows in your calendar that you have an appointment in an hour, but according to current traffic, it's only 30 minutes drive, and that app would suggest a route that deviates from the shortest route to a most exciting route to actually use the car to its potential and have a nice curvy country road. And that could be exciting. It could be exciting that we have something like, we call it the Mark Webber app. So in times when you want to learn how you use your car most efficiently on a racetrack, this app would actually give you the blueprint of what Mark Webber would do on the racetrack, and you use that as a training opportunity for your own driving skills. So, the digital world out there caters for so much, and that's why we have these digital teams in Atlanta that will work on some of those use cases. But these are two of the ones that I can talk about.
I thought it was interesting that Porsche has taken a bit of a closed loop sort of ecosystem approach, meaning, one of its partners is you've integrated Apple Music, but and I know that the majority of your customers are iOS or iPhone owners, but Android is kind of left out. And as an Android user, I'm wondering when that is going to change. I mean, is Porsche open to a company that has a completely different approach, a very open-sourced approach? Are you going to have to adapt regionally? I mean, I think of China, for example, as one place where if you want to sell a Taycan, you might need to be offering Android.
Oh, we will offer Android solutions. Now, why aren't we doing that right now? Let's take the United States. 91% of our customers, Porsche customers, have an Apple device. So this is how you most efficiently invest your money. But if you take China, for example, it's interesting. Our current customers in China, 80% of them have got an Apple device, which is also staggering. But if you ask them what's your next device going to be, actually 40% of those say it's going to be an Android device. So there's a lot of movement in the market, and obviously you have to do what customers do. And that's why Android will be a solution going forward.
What else are you going to have to do to adapt to the marketplace in China? I mean, is the Taycan or the Macan or any other future sort of electrification plays going to have to be fundamentally different in any other way besides, let's say, the Android component?
Well, I think the biggest challenge when we talk about battery electric vehicles in China is charging. If you take those mega cities where 20 million people live in high-rise buildings, parking, generally speaking, is a challenge, but then charging your car overnight, and let's bear in mind, 90% of charging, according to our market research, actually happens at home or at work. It doesn't happen at highway locations, downtown locations, destinations like hotels. It happens at home and at work. So that's the biggest challenge for China going forward, to electrify that country too. But we know China. If they want to do something, they're determined and they get it done. And we expect that to happen there too. But talk about challenges, that's a big one.
Are you going to then do something, speaking of charging infrastructure, and it is very unlike in the United States where many people have garages or there's charging infrastructure in apartment buildings. And Tesla ran into that early on when they went out there. So are you going to be doing similar partnerships as you've done here in the United States in terms of charging infrastructure, or do you see Porsche having any sort of hand in direct investment in building up charging infrastructure in China?
It'll be the VW Group, okay. A big player in the Chinese market, actually dominating the market in many segments. And of course, they have to take the lead here. Porsche is far too small in order to dominate the market with anything. I mean, if you take the United States, if you take 1,000 cars sold in any year, 3 cars are Porsches. So we are a small player with maybe a brand that punches above its weight limit.
Right. Well, Porsche embodies sort of this idea of the human driving experience. And so I wonder if automated driving, specifically fully autonomous driving, has a place in Porsche.
Yeah. It's interesting. When I started, I've been with Porsche over 20 years, but when I started this role here in the United States, in my first town hall, I asked into, the people working for Porsche in Atlanta, and I said, so who thinks that a Porsche should have an autonomous mode? Who thinks that? And out of 300 people sitting there were only 2 arms going up, and they clearly said, yes, of course, Porsche should have that. That shows a bit of the mindset that, how much we love being engaged with those pedals and our steering wheel and the manual gearbox. But obviously that's a thing of the past. Those 2 guys that raised their arm, they were interns. That just shows what the future holds for us. And if you take it rationally, autonomous drive mode in a Porsche, you can, of course, always engage with the steering wheel with pedals and maybe with a manual gearbox also going forward. But to hit that button that just says, take me home, is something that Porsche customers will want as well. And that's why we have to deliver that. We have to cater for that. And if you take the sequence of product innovations, starting with cruise control, then having lane assist, then lane departure warning, then adaptive cruise control, then traffic jam assist, we're moving there. It's an evolution that ends with an autonomous drive mode that cars will have. Now, will we see that also with all the legal challenges that we see in the market within the next 5 years? I think we'll see it in certain areas. We'll see it in geo-fenced areas, in highway areas where you get on, and for whatever time you have to be on that highway, you will have the opportunity to completely use that in an autonomous mode and do your emails and anything you want to do. In my commute every day, Atlanta, I live in the north. Atlanta, in terms of traffic, is a challenge. And 20 miles. So if I could hit that button that takes me down the I-75, and could carry on doing my emails, I'd be very happy. And so we need to cater for that.
So I'm curious how you're going to get there. I mean, you talked a bit about an iterative approach, but depending on who you speak to within the industry, there's either sort of two tracks. There's this take ADAS and slowly get better over time, and then there's no, there needs to be a complete focus on full automation and creating a system with the types of redundancies and embedded and integrated technology that is required for that. So what is the approach for Porsche? Are you going to just slowly improve upon your InnoDrive system now and then eventually have that take me home button?
The latter. We wouldn't use a beta version of any software for customers to then find out on whether the car can do it or not. So no, it has to be evolutionary. It has to be something where customers are always safe. It has to be something where the legal framework within we're moving is crystal clear. But as I said, it's from a technological point of view, doing that on a highway is not too far away. That's easily possible. It's going to be like an HOV lane, but it's for autonomous drive mode operated cars. So we're going to see that first. And from my point of view, that's actually maybe 90% of what people really expect. I don't need my car to meet me at the entrance of Whole Foods, being summoned from the parking lot. That's nice. That's almost like a gamification. And some people will, like that because they can show off. I think the typical use case is something that really takes away the burden of driving in situations where you can do something that is more sensible or more joyful.
So you're kind of taking a sort of an industry prediction approach there. So I'm wondering, what is your timeline of when we might see that sort of highway driving, and where does Porsche fit in that timeline? You said it's close, but throw out a year.
Yeah, no, you're going to remind me of that, so I'm going to go far back in the time. But I think we're going to see in 21, 22, we're going to see the first HOV comparable lanes in our daily commute that will be reserved for autonomous drive mode vehicles. Simply because that is really where I can see a customer benefit. But let's wait and see.
And where do you see Porsche on that timeline? Is it going to be a leader in being one of the first, or?
No. Porsche, when we take leadership, it's going to be very close to the core of our brand, whether it's braking power, acceleration, top speed. People in this room might know Nürburgring, Nordschleife, which is a racetrack in Germany, which is actually your meter to find out on whether your car is a true sports car. So that's where we put our money on. We wouldn't put it on that, but we're very aware of the fact that we need to do something about it, but we will be a follower and not a pioneer. Maybe comparable, I will never forget 20 years ago when every car already in the United States had cup holders. Now go to a Weissach, our research and development department, engineering dominated environment, and tell them we need cup holders. They said, "Are you insane? That cup. Why would you have a cup of coffee in a sports car?" And we weren't the pioneer in terms of installing cup holders, but there's no Porsche where you can't find a cup holder nowadays because it's convenient and people want it.
To wrap up the autonomous sort of segment of this, is most of the research development that it will end up on in terms of ADAS and then eventually full automation going to come within Porsche or VW Group?
It's going to come from one of the platforms that either Porsche or Audi or VW develops. Now the Taycan is a platform that was fully developed by Porsche that's going to be utilized through other parts of our VW Group brand setup. And the Macan, for example, it's going to be on a different platform that's going to be developed within the VW Group, but not by Porsche. So we're sharing these, the engineers call them skateboards, where you just put on a hat and adapt that car to what your brand actually requires. And then, you can also share a lot of the cost burden.
All right, so we're going to do a speed round, fit in the last two questions I wanted to ask. So there's been quite an uptick in EV racing, and I'm wondering, from Formula student to DTM, and I'm wondering when and where would be the right place for Porsche to go, and I know they do hybrid, but to do pure electric racing.
Well, you did not mention Formula E. Now, Formula E is from my point of view, it's got the highest potential to be a serious racing platform, and we're going to be there actually this month, first race, so keep your fingers crossed for us. We'll start from zero, we're humble, we're not there to win, we're there to learn, but we've done that in the past for a couple of decades, and so far it worked out well. And are you going to shift sort of all of your motorsports resources towards Formula E, or is there still a place for the other races? We were in the Le Mans racing series, so we won Le Mans 24 hours prior to last year, because we then left that series 3 times, and we shifted exactly these capacities when we left the Le Mans series into Formula E, and all the engineers are now working on battery electric race cars. Okay, last question, then we'll wrap it up. Flying cars, which sounds crazy, but for Porsche to be participating in, but you are, right? Yes. So what's the future of flying cars? It's interesting you call them flying cars. I think I would call them flying objects. Okay. But we are a car company, so I appreciate that. No, I think actually the mobility in the future, especially in certain urban areas, will require a third dimension to get from A to B. Now, is that a mass transport structure or infrastructure? No, of course not. But for us, we identified that as something that our customers might find interesting, might find a liking. So we've just announced a cooperation with Boeing. We have the first prototype is actually already flying. It's a 1-3 model, and we're building the full blown 100% flying object as we speak, and let's see. It's a nice project. Great. Well, thanks so much for joining me on stage. Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.